I was trained in the postmodern art academy. I haven't got any applied art training. I was surrounded with people making all kinds of things, and we would somehow meet on the ground of ideas. And it's somehow beyond the historical notion of conceptual art practice, because we were using conceptual art as a faraway historical tool of producing art. We would use it with a kind of neutrality, a loose involvement. I always had this extreme desire to be everything and to do everything. And according to everything I see and perceive every day, it's pretty hard to feel good in this world. And art seems to me as a good place to be. Because you fabricate a world, you make it as you wish. For me, dance is the ability to puzzle, to concentrate, to accept conflict and tensions. It's the willingness to be born every day, to feel a sense of self. For this show, I wanted nothing but the dancers, no costumes, no set. I want something that really gets as close as possible as what you see now during a rehearsal or a brainstorming, or in dance we call it body storming. I don't really believe in movement. Dance is so much and somehow only about movement that I find it's useless to talk about it. So I see myself as an author, like the author of a setting, and the dancers are within the limit of that setting. You know, it's like inviting people for dinner. You pick the wine, you choose the music, and you make a pie, and the guests are sitting at the table, and something happened, and sometimes not. I work mainly with classical musicians. They're trained along lines of perfections, and they're probably the most amazing person to work with. Because you will rarely meet in the art world people with such amazing skills and so little ego. And I need that.
Like, how do you expect me to play this?
Just, it's doubling. It's doubling. You see, it's constant doubling.
Right.
More, it's gonna hum more.
Empezamos aquí. I'm composing now an opera for the Baltimore Philharmonic. So in the studio we're trying to set new rules, and it's not working most of the time. But meanwhile we're trying, something is happening in the way. So we need to be patient and focus enough to perceive the instant where something will happen. There's a part of me that needs to sit at the piano and work for hours, but I sit in a very, very different state. I'm trying to be conscious of everything and nothing. In that sense, music is maybe the most exhausting work. It's like hyperactive meditation. I think that's part of what keeps art interesting to me. Going to the studio and trying to figure it out. Just what it is that keeps me going back to the studio. And in some broad way, I've always thought of my work and art in general as trying to solve that question of how does a person function in the world, however narrowly or broadly you want to define that. And then how do I specifically function, and what is the artist's role? And so it's looking after that all the time. What does it all mean? What do I want being an artist to mean? How do I think it can fit into the culture? Music is a world that has very little to do with all the other things I'm working on. I don't feel like I understand music that much. I don't know how to be successful. I don't know what to do to recreate something I've done and liked. The painting studio is where a lot of things are happening. We built that studio so that it is between inside and outside. I do most of the carving myself. I work with the same printer for 4 years, and I don't see color that well. But Chris knows the name of over 300 colors. When I sit down to make a drawing, the first thing I'm trying to do is to forget that I have ever seen a painting or a drawing before. Tourne ta tête. Tourne ta tête. Ok, regarde-moi maintenant. Tu me regardes? I have very little imagination. I like working with live models, drawing out from nature. There is a flute played by the Native Americans of Venezuela that can only be heard by the one who plays it. And as much as I admire the player of that flute, I really can't relate to this type of practice. Because for me, art is only made to be seen and heard. I don't need to make art for myself. I am not that genuine about it, maybe. I just need to make art in order to function normally as a working individual within a society and sustain a living. But on a deserted island, I would probably find other pleasures. I would very, very doubtly start making drawing in the sand and sculpture with coconut, or performance at the moonlight, or installation with crabs and kiwis. And that's why I, despite irony, because irony is like not wanting to make art, or like saying, I make art, but it's not the point where I'm getting. And if you want to be respected as an artist, one must feel that you respect your job. I think that there is a role that I need to play in that big circus. And maybe just as an extra dancing in the back while Marcel Duchamp is riding a horse in the front and Damien Hirst is doing flip-flop on a tiger's back. And I think that this is the way every artist should foresee his career. But of course, flip-flopping on an elephant back is much easier. The installation seems now like a very striking reconciliation between life and death. Something extremely alive and burlesque and funny, but also extremely painful and somehow barely watchable. It's too direct, and yet the mechanical aspect of the whole structure brings a distance. And only the viewer will decide what is that distance that you decide to establish. It's like watching the news while eating. You make choice all the time. And those choices are emotional, and they talk about our involvement within the world. When men are dying, they enter history. And when statues are dying, they enter into art. And this botanique of that is what we call culture. Art has to be useful. We need to use it at some point for some reason. It doesn't need to help you live, as we sometimes hear. It's way too dramatic. Sex will help you live, and love will help you live, but art doesn't compete with love and sex. It just needs to keep being that window where you get stimulation and see more of the others and see more of yourself. Because a reader of a book is always a reader of himself.